Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. From the international edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles for a detailed analysis. We have 3 important articles that are more relevant for the mains examination. So we will dive deep into these topics and cover them comprehensively so that you should be able to answer any mains or even prelims questions that might be asked from these important articles. And we have 5 smaller articles that are exclusively relevant for the prelims exam, and we'll take a quick look at these smaller articles as well. So before we start the analysis, we have a few very important announcements. Yesterday was a very important day for the 2023 civil services aspirants because UPSC announced the final results. More than 1,000 candidates have made it to the top list. So we would like to wish all those successful candidates congratulations and all the very best. For those who did not clear the exam, don't be dejected because this is a time to introspect. This is a time to go back and find out where you went wrong, identify those mistakes and bring that motivation back to attempt the exam again and correct those mistakes and to crack the exam in the upcoming attempt. And we at Unacademy are very happy to announce that more than 315 candidates have taken the benefit of our IAS program, which has helped them in cracking the examination. To ensure that the data is more transparent, we are providing the breakdown as well. Around 66 toppers were part of our online-offline classroom program. Around 95 students who have topped the exam, they were learners on the Unacademy platform, and around 154 candidates, they got the benefit of the last mile program that we carry out, which provides interview guidance. So on the basis of these results and in the backdrop of this good news, we would like to offer an opportunity for all the students to realize this dream of cracking the IAS examination. So we are providing a massive price drop in our IAS courses from around 75,000 to below 30,000 so that all of you can ensure that you can access our IAS courses and realize your IAS dream. And also to further help you in cracking your IAS dream, we are launching Conquer Prelims to help you in your preparation for the upcoming attempt. So as part of 2024 Prelims program, we are launching an exclusive crash course, Conquer Prelims 2024. And this program will have 2 separate sections. There is one section dedicated for revision of all the static topics and concepts. This crash course, focused on the static part of your syllabus, will be exclusive on the Unacademy app. So this course is starting from 19th April in a couple of days. The program will continue till the 7th of June on the Unacademy app. So we will have live sessions every day from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. covering all the important subjects. A total of 51 live classes, 50 live classes will be provided on the Unacademy app to help you revise and cover all the important static topics for the upcoming prelims. Then to help you in your current affairs preparation, a separate current affairs crash course will begin from the 1st of May on our YouTube channel. So the current affairs part of the crash course will take place right here on our YouTube channel starting from 1st of May and it will continue till 31st of May. So 31 live classes from 7:30 to 9 p.m. So I strongly urge you to attend all these sessions live because that gives you an opportunity to interact with the teachers as well and more importantly, to stay consistent with the timetable to ensure that you don't miss a single class. So here is the breakdown of all the classes under Conquer Prelims. These are the classes allotted for different subjects from polity to history to geography, environment, ecology, etc. And even other important areas like reports and indices, government schemes, places in news, India yearbook. All these important areas will be covered so that you should be thoroughly prepared for the upcoming prelims. So all you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel and download the Unacademy app. And do follow each individual teacher on the Unacademy app so that you're notified about these upcoming live classes. Right? You can find those links, the profile links of every teacher, in the video description of this YouTube video. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at this important article from page number 1. On the front page itself, The Hindu carries this article referring to a major anti-Naxal operation that was carried out in the Conquer district of Chhattisgarh, which is located in the Bastar region. I hope you know that the Bastar region of Chhattisgarh has become infamous as the Naxal hub of India. So there are few pockets in central and eastern India which have been the hubs of Naxalism, which is a type of left-wing extremism. So in the Naxal hotbed, a major anti-Naxal operation has been carried out by the security forces. The BSF, the Border Security Force, which also plays a role in anti-Naxal operations, has led this intelligence-based operation along with support from the state police. The Chhattisgarh District Reserve Police has backed up the BSF, which is a central armed police force under the Home Ministry, and they've conducted a joint anti-Naxal operation based on specific intelligence inputs. These security forces received a vital piece of information through intelligence sources that top cadres of CPI Maoists were hiding in the forested areas of the Bastar region in Conquer district. And based on this specific intelligence, they have carried out a targeted counter-insurgency operation. Around 29 Maoists have been killed and 3 soldiers also have been injured. This happens to be one of the biggest anti-Naxal operations to have been conducted in recent times. In fact, the last time so many Maoists were killed was in 2018 in the Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra in the Amravati Vidarbha region. Back in 2018, a similar large-scale anti-Naxal operation was carried out where 37 Maoists were killed. So after that, this has to be the biggest anti-Naxal operation, and that is why the topic is very, very important. It gives us an opportunity to understand everything about Maoism, at least the basics, to understand the ideology, to understand its origin in India, the root causes behind the rise of Naxalism, and to understand how Naxalism has spread across the country, how it has affected India in the past, and what are the recent trends. What is the current status of Naxalism, and what has the government done to counter Naxalism? So these are the key topics that we will be covering in this detailed discussion. So just stay with me for a few minutes. I promise that this discussion will be extremely helpful for your mains exam, because you can even expect an essay topic on Maoism. There can be an entire essay related to Naxalism and left-wing extremism. The topic is very important under GS Paper 3 for internal security, and it is related to other subjects as well. From international relations to polity to governance, the topic shares a lot of interconnections, and hence it's important to understand this in slight detail. So first, let's understand what exactly is Maoism. Maoism is a type of left-wing extremist ideology. It's a type of political extremism. It has its roots in the Communist Party of China, and it was brought out under the leadership of Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong, the then leader of the Communist Party of China, who led the communists to victory in the Chinese Civil War. During the Chinese Civil War of 1930s, 1940s, it was the Communist Party which brought the masses together. The farmers, the peasants, workers, laborers, all the marginalized classes, the downtrodden sections, they were all united and inspired to take up an armed rebellion against the then Chinese state, the Republic of China. This armed rebellion was led by Mao Zedong, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China. So Mao Zedong laid down the ideological motivation and the principles and the strategies and tactics that defines Maoism. So Mao's ideology was that if the state does not care about its people, if the state is not looking after the welfare of the marginalized classes and the downtrodden sections, then according to Mao Zedong, the only option to get justice is to throw the state out. So under Maoism, violence is inherent to this ideology. That's why it's a radical extremist ideology. Mao Zedong gave a call that all the marginalized classes have to unite and take up an armed rebellion against the state. There is no other option, no other way out suggested by Mao Zedong. No mediation, no protests, no faith in a peaceful rebellion. The only ideology here is to engage in violence, to take up an armed rebellion against the state. And the sole objective here is to capture state power. According to Maoism, capturing state power is the objective of the Maoists. That is, they challenge the government directly. They want to throw the government out and replace the government with the people's rule, the so-called people's rule. So this political extremist ideology, which is a type of left-wing extremism, is what we call as Maoism. So during the Chinese Civil War, the Communist Party obviously won. They defeated the then Chinese state, the Republic of China. The Kuomintang Party, which ruled mainland China back then, was defeated and was thrown out to the island of Taiwan. And in mainland China, the Maoists captured power, and that is how the PRC was born. That is how modern China was established, People's Republic of China, ruled by the Communist Party. So this radical extremist ideology started gaining popularity in many countries around the world. And the PRC would promote this. The Chinese state would promote the spread of Maoism in several other countries, including in India. So wherever the circumstances were right to unite the downtrodden sections, the marginalized classes, the Maoists, these left-wing extremist communists, would spread their propaganda. They would spread their radical ideology and inspire the masses to take up an armed rebellion against the state. Now, if you look at the strategies and tactics of Maoists, there are few unique strategies and tactics that they follow. Mao Zedong himself has laid down these principles. Mao Zedong advocated to the Maoists that you have to make use of the local geography and terrain to your advantage. That's why usually Maoists, they hide in forests, they take cover in jungles, they use the local terrain, the local geography to their advantage. Because they know the local terrain better, be it the mountains, the rivers, or the forests. They use that as a cover, as a camouflage, and launch an armed rebellion against the state. They target the state forces. Mao Zedong also pointed out the importance of propaganda. So Maoists are extremely good in communication. They spread their radical ideology. They communicate with the target audience. They identify the affected population like farmers, tribal communities, indigenous people, or workers or laborers, and they further brainwash them. They increase the resentment that they have against the state. Because many times the state might have failed. Governance might have failed. So due to poor governance, injustice might have been done to farmers. Due to wrong policies of the government, due to corruption, injustice could have been done to tribal communities, workers, and other downtrodden sections. So these weaker classes are targeted by Maoists. They radicalize them, they brainwash them, and they inculcate them into the Maoist war, into the rebellion, and they call for an armed rebellion against the state. So they are very good in propaganda. They are very well structured and organized as well. They have a proper command structure. There is a Politburo which takes all the big political decisions. They have a separate armed wing which engages in the warfare against the state. They will have a separate intelligence wing, a separate wing to raise funds, a separate wing to raise the weapons as well. So they are very well structured, very well organized, because they are trying to replicate the state machinery. Since they want to liberate these areas, throw the state out and capture those areas to form a people-led government. They want to show to the people that they have the ability to govern. That in the future, if the state is thrown out, they want to convince their supporters that they have the ability to rule, to govern. And that is why they mimic or they try to replicate the government machinery. So they're very well organized. They have a hierarchy, just like a government organizational structure. They try to replicate that. They try to push out the state forces and the state administration, and they try to call them liberated areas. So this is what Maoism believes in. And that is the reason why there is no place for Maoist ideology in a modern civilized state. In a constitutional democracy like India, you can never tolerate an extremist ideology like Maoism. There might be certain genuine root causes that the Maoists might have exploited, but there is no justification for engaging in violence when you have other democratic means to express your dissent. You can protest, you can contest elections, you can hold the government accountable for its failures through various other means and methods. But resorting to violence is not tolerable in a civilized state. And that is why Maoism is a prohibited ideology. It's a violent, extremist, left-wing ideology, left-wing extremist ideology. And in India, the Maoism that took root in India is called Naxalism. So Maoism, Naxalism are one and the same. So Maoism, which originated in India, is called Naxalism because it took birth in the Naxalbari village in West Bengal. In the year 1967, in West Bengal, over here you can see the map as well. This is India's Siliguri corridor, the narrow land corridor that connects northeast India with rest of India. It's also called the chicken's neck of India. It's a vulnerable choke point. So near Siliguri, you have the Naxalbari village where the first Maoist rebellion broke out. The year was 1967. So that is why Maoism in India is named after the Naxalbari village, and hence it's also called Naxalism or the Naxal movement. So Naxalism has taken root in India and spread across multiple states and districts by exploiting certain genuine root causes across the country. A few genuine root causes, which is a result of poor administration, failed governance over the decades, has been exploited by the Maoists to spread their radical ideology. For example, if you look at Naxalbari itself, if you look at West Bengal and the Bihar region and understand why Maoism took root here in eastern India, you will find that the root cause is related to land-related factors. Because in West Bengal and Bihar, we largely had a feudal society where zamindars would own large tracts of land. They would exploit the lower caste, the bonded laborers. There was a huge class divide that existed in the feudal society of West Bengal and Bihar. The land reforms that had been initiated post-independence had largely failed. They weren't effectively implemented. There was large-scale corruption at the grassroots, where zamindars would collude with policemen, with politicians, and they wouldn't allow the reforms to be implemented. So eventually, the peasants, the landless laborers, farmers who were frustrated with the feudal nature of the society, with the exploitation, they rebelled, they resented, and they took up Maoist ideology. Maoists led by Charu Majumdar and other extremists, they had spread the ideology, exploited the resentment amongst the peasantry, and they triggered an armed rebellion which resulted in violence in Naxalbari. The peasants, with the support of the Maoists, they targeted the zamindars and killed several zamindars and others who were in collusion, triggering the first Naxal violence in India. So in other parts of India, there were many such reasons. For example, in the tribal belts, forest and environment related laws were a major concern. Environmental legislation like Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, the Forest Conservation Act. These laws and policies, even though they were designed for protection of environment and biodiversity, they led to the displacement of tribal communities. large public projects like mining projects, dam projects, road projects, even though they were essential for national development and nation building, many times the local communities would not be consulted. Their consent would not be obtained and they would be forcefully evicted, resulting in severe economic and livelihood loss for the local community. So those who are affected by such government policies as a result of poor administration, as a result of corruption, right, they would naturally have a sense of resentment against the state. They would gradually lose faith in the Indian democracy, in the Indian constitution itself. And those would be the targets for Maoists. The Maoists, the Naxals, they would target them. They would spread their propaganda, brainwash them, radicalize them, and try to gain mass support to lead an armed rebellion against the state. So they would target the farmers as well, given the agrarian distress in India. They would focus on workers and laborers in the industry who were affected by the pro-management policies of the government, especially in India's factory system. Right? There was a nexus that existed between factory owners and government officials and politicians. So as factory management would try to suppress labor rights and look down upon the workers, it created a huge divide between industrial workers and the owners, causing resentment. And this would be exploited by the Naxals. So across India, in several states and districts, the Naxal ideology was spread, it was propagated over the decades. Throughout 1970s, 1980s, Naxalism spread, and eventually we saw the rise of the Naxal corridor, the red corridor of India. So you can see here in the map, it depicts the affected states and districts. So there was one branch of Maoism that took root in Bihar, West Bengal belt, in this region of eastern India, centered around Bihar and West Bengal. There was one branch of Maoism led by the Maoist Communist Center of India and the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist. So from 1960s to 1970s, these were the major Maoist outfits leading the rebellion against the Indian state, with Bihar, West Bengal region as their hub, as the center of their operations. The Maoist Communist Center of India, MCCI, the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, and other extremist communist factions. Parallelly, there was another set of Maoist outfits that were born in eastern parts of India, central and eastern parts of India. The PWG, the People's War Group, started taking shape by 1970s, which was centered around this region, around Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, and today's Chhattisgarh and Maharashtra region. So primarily around Andhra Pradesh, around the Telangana, Odisha, Andhra region, in the Eastern Ghats, the People's War Group rose to prominence by exploiting the resentment of the tribals and farmers present in this region. So back in 1970s, 1980s, we had two different factions of Naxalism. One was led by the MCCI and other communist factions in Bihar, West Bengal belt, and the other was PWG, leading the Naxal movement around Andhra Pradesh. So multiple states were affected by this movement. The ideology was spreading from Odisha to Maharashtra to Madhya Pradesh. Later, when Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh were carved out, Naxalism was a major concern, a major threat in these central and eastern parts of India. It would even spread to parts of Western Ghats in few parts of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. It would spread to the Delhi NCR region as well, to Punjab and parts of Haryana as well. So at one point, left-wing extremism was indeed India's biggest security concern. But by 1990s, India managed to weaken these movements through some targeted security operations. But by 2001, by the year 2001, both the factions of the Naxal outfits, they were sufficiently weakened, especially the PWG. The People's War Group operating around Andhra Pradesh was targeted by the Greyhounds, which was an elite special force unit a counter-insurgency special force unit that specialized in guerrilla warfare, jungle warfare. Because that is a tactic used by the Maoists as well. Mao Zedong himself spoke about the importance of engaging in guerrilla wars, in using the jungle to their advantage, and in carrying out surprise ambush attacks against forces. So that has been their strategy and tactic, and it was countered quite effectively by the Andhra police by establishing an elite special force unit called the Greyhounds. So they managed to weaken the PWG in the 1990s. And also by then India started developing, economic reforms were initiated in 90s. Lot of opportunities came up across India. So people started moving out from here. Migration increased. People found better jobs, better livelihood across different parts of India, thereby leading to the subsidence in the Naxal activity. By 2001, these groups had been actually weakened. But in the year 2004, there was a big dramatic development. In the year 2004, these Maoist outfits, which were weakened, they were on the decline, they came together to form a coalition and established a new Maoist outfit called CPI Maoist. This was one of the biggest developments in the field of India's internal security, according to Intelligence Bureau. These Maoist outfits, which had been weakened by 1990s and 2001, they came together to pool their resources together. They came together and formed a united front and established the CPI Maoist, which today leads the Naxal war against India. So this is a designated terrorist organization today. Under UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, CPI Maoist is a banned organization. It's a terrorist organization. So since then, CPI Maoist has been leading the Naxal war against the Indian state, and it has shifted its focus towards the Chhattisgarh-Odisha belt. Since PWG was cornered from all the sides in Andhra Pradesh, parts of Odisha and Maharashtra, and since MCCI and other Maoists were weakened in Bihar and West Bengal, they were pushed towards the center, towards the Dandakaranya region, right? The densely forested areas of Chhattisgarh and Odisha, which is an extension of the Eastern Ghats. And this would become the new hub of Naxalism. So around Chhattisgarh, Odisha, today we have the major Naxal hub where CPI Maoist has considerable influence. So since then, we saw a revival of Naxalism, especially from 2004 to 2010. The Naxal attacks increased, their influence in some of the districts went up, posing a significant threat for India. In fact, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh even categorized left-wing extremism as India's biggest internal security threat. But after that, the then UPA government took corrective action. It focused on countering Naxalism through a very comprehensive, holistic approach. And this helped India to tackle the threat posed by Naxalism. There were effective counter-insurgency operations. There was focus on better administration, better development and governance. And as a result, we managed to subside the Naxal movement again and cut down their influence. But recently, we again saw an uptick in Naxal violence from 2017-2018. And under the Modi government, again, India has been targeting and crushing the Naxal movement. And today, the Naxal movement is on the decline again. So this has been the broad trend of Naxalism in India. We have seen few periods of spike in Naxal activity and decline in Naxal activity. But at the end of the day, it still remains an active threat. And that is what is important. Now, if you ask me, what do the Naxals target? Who are the primary targets for Naxals? They primarily target the state. Anything that represents the state, because their goal is to challenge the state, to throw the state out and capture state power. So they target the government buildings and installations, public infrastructure. They target the security forces, which represent the state. They target the police. They target the central security forces, right? They target government officials as well. There have been incidents where IAS, IPS officers have been targeted, kidnapped as well. I'm not telling this to scare you, but that has been the challenge with regard to administration in the Naxal areas. So anything that represents the state is their primary target. They could even target private businesses, mainly to extort money, but Naxal attacks are largely restricted to attacks on the state itself. For example, they oppose elections. They don't allow elections to be conducted. They threaten the electoral officials. They threaten the voters, the candidates as well. Essentially, they are targeting the Indian democracy, the Indian constitution, and elections represent that. So anything that represents the Indian state, the Indian constitution, is the target of the Naxals. Now, the question is, how are they raising funds? How could Naxal movement remain active for so many decades, for more than 50 years? This couldn't have happened without a good source of funding. There are different sources through which Naxals have raised finances. There was a period where China allegedly was providing funds, but this was very limited. Indian intelligence agencies believe that China has indeed provided financial support and the required backing to build the momentum in India for the Maoist movement. But this was largely in the 1970s, 1980s. Of late, this has gone down. It's been very limited support from China. The external support for Naxals is quite limited. But Naxals have found other ways of raising funds, mainly through extortion. They function like organized criminal cartels, like criminal gangs. They threaten local businesses, industries, and politicians and take a collection from them, like a hafta. Right? There have been instances where few politicians have hired Naxals to target their political opponents. That also shows the nexus between political elements and the Naxal groups. So this nexus does exist, and mainly through extortion, Naxals have been raising a lot of funds. Apart from that, they get involved in other types of organized crime, especially drug trafficking. In the Naxal corridor, drug production is carried out. They push the farmers to cultivate opium. They smuggle and traffic these drugs. They have tie-ups with global arms cartels and other terror groups as well, and they smuggle weapons and drugs for them. Naxals are known to have connections with Sri Lanka's LTTE, Northeast insurgent groups, even with Pakistan-sponsored terrorist outfits like Lashkar-e-Toiba. So Naxals have worked with various extremist groups and criminal organizations, and they have been involved in drugs and arms trafficking, which brings a lot of funds. There could also be sympathizers, Naxal sympathizers, who sympathize with Naxal ideology because there are certain genuine root causes which has affected our farmers, our tribal communities, etc. Right? And they could be providing donations. So these are the different sources of funding. But now the question is, where are they getting the weapons from? Because Naxals are known to possess sophisticated arms and weapons. They have AK-47, they have GPS-based communication navigation systems. Right? So how did they access such advanced communication systems and weapon systems? So either they procure advanced weaponry from global arms trafficking groups and other terror groups, but they also loot from the police and security forces. They mainly target police stations, the armory of the security forces where they know that weapons are stored. So when they carry out an ambush attack, for example, when they target, let's say, a convoy of security forces, after killing our security forces, they loot the weapons. They steal weapons from our own forces. They attack our armories, the police station armories and security forces armories, and loot the weapons of the government forces. Apart from that, they even procure local country guns, which are illegally manufactured by the criminal groups operating in Bihar, UP, and Nepal. If you have seen Mirzapur, the popular web series, it does pay attention to the problem of illegal gun factories and how it is linked with crime and other extremist activities. Right? So this is a very true depiction. In the parts of UP and Bihar and the border areas with Nepal, there are many illegal gun-making factories that produce these local country-made guns, which are cheaper. Right? And that is something that Naxals procure. So this has been the modus operandi of Naxals. This is how they raise funds, this is how they procure weapons, and that is how they target the state forces. So countering left-wing extremism has been a priority for Indian governments. Subsequent governments have ensured that we remain on top of this threat but it requires a lot of coordination between center and states. Because this is more of an internal security problem, where states have a bigger responsibility. So states have to lead the fight against Naxalism and center has to supplement the state resources. So until 2004, India's approach was very short-sighted. Until 2004, India's approach to counter Naxalism was just focused on the security approach. Because the governments saw this only as a security problem. They never understood the root cause behind the ideology. They never understood the ideological motivation. But after CPI Maoist was formed, after the CPI Maoist became a formidable threat for India, that is when greater attention was paid to the root causes associated with Naxalism. Apart from treating this as a security problem, it was also seen as an administrative problem. The government started acknowledging the failure in governance, the failure on the part of the government in uplifting the farmers, the tribal communities, the workers, etc. It started addressing these governance-related issues and provide good governance to these affected areas, create better infrastructure, create livelihood opportunities, compensate the people who have lost their farmland, who have lost their livelihood because of government projects and laws, etc. So through all these administrative measures, the government has been focusing on a two-pronged approach. Both the pillars are critical in countering left-wing extremism. One is to bridge the gap in administration, to bridge the gap in governance through better implementation of government schemes, through better delivery of public services, and protection of constitutionally guaranteed and legally guaranteed rights. For example, tribal communities have certain rights, constitutional rights, under the 5th schedule. We have specific provisions and laws which provide for certain protection for farmers, for tribal communities, etc. So ensuring that these rights are delivered, these public services, government schemes are delivered with minimal corruption has been the focus of improved governance and administration. So apart from tackling the root causes, we have stepped up our security approach as well. The center has deployed Central Armed Police Forces led by CRPF. CRPF is the primary designated anti-Naxal force of the Home Ministry. And Home Ministry has even set up a dedicated division. Within the Home Ministry, there is a left-wing extremism division that coordinates the fight against Naxalism. A dedicated left-wing extremism division has been set up that will coordinate with the state governments, provide all the funds, share the intelligence, and deploy the central forces, the Central Armed Police Forces, to assist the state police forces. Even other CAPFs like BSF, ITBP, and SSB, these are other Central Armed Police Forces, which are also deployed in the Naxal corridor, which assist the state police forces. So today there is focus on intelligence-based operations. The intelligence agencies are more proactively involved in assisting the security forces. Intelligence Bureau, NTRO, and other intelligence agencies, they generate valuable intelligence which helps the central and state forces to plan their targeted operations. And today there is focus not just on neutralizing the top leaders and the mid-level commanders, but also to target the sources of funding. So this has helped India to weaken Naxalism over the years. Initially, the UPA government under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh launched a series of covert operations in the forests and jungles of India. It is informally called Operation Green Hunt, which apparently went on from 2009 to 2012. The government doesn't acknowledge this counterinsurgency operation, but various reports, credible reports, indicate that there was a comprehensive counterinsurgency operation carried out across multiple states where central forces and agencies worked with state forces to target Naxals. So Operation Green Hunt played a big role in weakening Naxalism. And now in the last 5 to 6 years, especially after 2017, the Modi government has further clamped down on Naxalism, and today you see a big decline in Naxal activity. In fact, let me just give you one important statistic before I end the discussion. If you look at the initial years, for example, let's say we go back to 1970s, 1980s. During this period, Naxal influence was so high that almost 180 districts in the country were under some kind of Naxal influence. That is nearly 33% of India's geographical area. So nearly 1/3 of India's territory was under some kind of Naxal influence during the peak of Naxalism. At least around 80 to 90 districts during this period had a very strong presence of Naxal activity. That was the extent of Naxalism back in the 80s, 70s and 90s. This substantially declined. By 2004-2010, this had substantially been brought down to around 95 districts being under Naxal influence, with around 45 districts having a strong Naxal influence. And now this has been further reduced. As per the latest data provided by the Ministry of Home Affairs, today less than 45 districts experience any Naxal influence or activity. They have a strong presence, a strong hold in less than 20 districts today. In less than 20 districts, they have a strong hold, a strong presence, with influence being present in around 40-45 districts, not more than that. So you see a consistent decline in Naxalism and Naxal activity and Naxal influence. So the credit goes to the security operations of the center and the state, plus the administrative approach, the developmental approach, by acknowledging the root cause of the problem. Because you can't win these ideological wars without addressing the genuine root cause, right? So India has done quite well in tackling the threat, and now the government is trying to give a final push to wipe out Naxalism from India. So that is what you should understand from this very, very important topic. And with this, let's move on to the next article from page number 10. The article is talking about the process of conducting elections in India. Now that it is election season, right? The general elections are all set to begin. And I'm sure you know how we cast our votes. On voting day, we go to the polling booths and we cast our vote through an electronic machine called the EVM, the electronic voting machine. So let's understand the story behind it, the history behind it, because there are certain concerns that have been expressed with regard to the usage of electronic machines and other electronic devices which are used in the electoral process in India. In fact, there have been a bunch of petitions filed at the Supreme Court as well, challenging the usage of EVMs, and they are calling for 100% accounting of all VVPAT paper trails to be matched with the votes recorded on the ballot box on the EVM, to ensure that there is full transparency in the electoral process, to ensure that the votes are properly captured. So there are two articles today actually dealing with this topic. We have a column explaining what are EVMs, when was EVMs introduced, what are the advantages through EVMs, what are the concerns related to it. All these points are discussed here. We will take a look at that. There's an article on the front page as well referring to the ongoing case of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has said that it is not possible to return to paper ballot, because a batch of petitioners led by a civil society group called ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms, which is headed by Prashant Bhushan, a popular lawyer and a civil society activist. They have called for the return of paper ballots to replace the EVMs, which are controversial. Some of the activists have questioned the integrity of EVMs. They've alleged that EVMs can be tampered with. The Election Commission of India has always denied these allegations and has even proven to the Supreme Court that EVMs cannot be tampered with. So Supreme Court, which was hearing these petitions, has said there is no question of going back to the system of ballot papers, right? EVMs are the norm. Using these machines along with VVPATs, which generate a paper trail, this will be the norm in India's electoral process. That is what the Supreme Court bench has observed. Right now, it is still looking at other related petitions, which are calling for 100% verification of the VVPAT trails with the votes recorded on the EVM machines. So it's in this context that we should understand more about EVMs and the electoral process in India. So let's understand how were elections conducted in India before EVMs were introduced. It's actually a very interesting story. If you look at India's first two general elections held in 1951-52 and 1957. These two general elections were very unique with regard to the voting process, because back then the Election Commission of India would set up separate ballot box for every candidate in a constituency. All right? And each ballot box would have the election symbol of the party of the candidate. The voters had to drop a blank paper. Can you believe that? There was no need for any stamping. Of course, no electronic voting was available then, right? But generally, if some of you remember, or if you can ask your parents how they used to vote, they will say that they would be given a ballot sheet where all the names of candidates, party names and symbols are listed, and they would put a stamp, put a stamp next to their candidate, to their choice of candidate, and then drop that ballot paper into the ballot box, right? But even before this system, there was something else, where there was no stamping, no casting of a vote as such. You would simply take a blank piece of paper given by the electoral authorities and drop it into a different box, depending on the candidate that you're choosing. For every candidate, there were separate ballot boxes. The ballot box would have the election symbol, because this was done primarily keeping in mind the low literacy levels in India, right? If names were printed on a sheet, every voter may not be able to identify the candidate, right? So a ballot box with simply the party symbol was an easier, convenient way, and a simpler way as well back in those days. That is how the first two general elections were conducted. You just have to take the blank ballot paper, drop it in the respective box of that candidate to whom you want to cast your vote. Then came a different system from the third elections, where a single ballot paper was introduced, which would be printed. The names of the candidates, the party name and the symbol, party symbol, everything would be printed on the same ballot paper, and then you put a stamp, right? You select your choice. You put a stamp and then drop the ballot paper by folding it into the ballot box. This system was introduced from the third general election onwards, and it continued until early 2000. Is that clear? So when was electronic voting introduced for the first time? The year was 1982 in the Paravur Assembly constituency of Kerala. This is where for the first time the Election Commission experimented with EVMs, electronic voting machines. Is that clear? Please remember the fact, it could be important. It was on a trial pilot basis that EVMs were introduced, and slowly it was scaled up. In subsequent assembly elections and general elections, more and more constituencies were being covered. So essentially from 1982 till 2004, a mix of EVMs and ballot papers were being used for elections. In some constituencies, EVMs were being used, but in majority of the constituencies, it was still paper ballot system. Is that clear? But then, in 2001, for the first time, Election Commission used EVMs in all the polling booths during the assembly elections of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Puducherry and West Bengal. That was the first time that EVMs were used in every polling booth, in every constituency in these state elections. So following the success here, EVMs were rolled out for every constituency for the Lok Sabha election held in 2004. So that was the first time that EVMs were used universally in every constituency, in all 543 constituencies of the Lok Sabha, in every single polling booth. Ballot papers were completely replaced by EVMs. So since then, this has been the norm. Is that clear? Now, there have been many questions raised about the integrity of EVMs. Since many years, critics have pointed out that any electronic device is vulnerable to tampering. It might be hacked or it can be externally tampered, right? So in this regard, the Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld the integrity of EVMs. Of course, it has looked into the matter, but Election Commission has given sufficient evidence to the Supreme Court to establish that EVMs cannot be tampered with, that the integrity of Indian elections is protected. So Supreme Court has upheld the validity of EVMs, and it has introduced, the Election Commission has introduced few systems of checks and balances as well to ensure that the process is completely foolproof. Now you might have a doubt, who manufactures so many EVMs in India? Who produces them? There are two public sector units that manufactured the EVMs for Election Commission of India. It is indigenously designed and developed. It's a completely Indian product. There is no foreign external involvement because that would be a huge risk, a security risk. What if a foreign manufacturer or a foreign government tampers with the device? So this is completely indigenous, developed in India, designed in India, produced in India by Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL, under the Defense Ministry, and ECIL, which is in Hyderabad, Electronic Corporation of India Limited, which is under the Department of Atomic Energy. So BEL Bengaluru and ECIL Hyderabad. These are the only two public sector units that produce the EVM machines. But in 2013, there was a very important case, the Subramaniam Swamy case versus Election Commission of India. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that a mandatory paper trail has to be provided. Because see, problem is when you cast your vote in an EVM, you press a button next to the choice of your candidate. But there is no confirmation, no acknowledgement given to you to show whether the vote has been correctly captured. Of course, there is a beeping sound. If you guys have cast your vote, I really hope you have. When you cast your vote, when you press the button on the EVM, there is a beeping sound which lasts for a few seconds, which gives you a confirmation. Plus, there is a LED light next to the button, which also gives you a confirmation. But critics were arguing that this is not enough. Externally, you might be giving a signal through a sound and a LED light that the vote has been captured correctly. But what happens inside is not known to the voters. It's an electronic device after all. What if someone has tampered with it? What if the device is malfunctioning? And what if your vote is getting wrongly accounted for some other candidate? That was a concern. So Supreme Court mandated that a paper trail has to be provided. Meaning the moment you press the button and cast your vote, apart from the beeping sound and the light which goes on, there should be a separate machine which prints out a piece of paper showing the choice of your candidate with the party name and symbol. This machine was introduced by the Election Commission following the Subramaniam Swamy case, which is what we call as VVPAT, Verifiable Voter Paper Audit Trail. Is that clear? So it's a verifiable paper trail, essentially. So for every vote, there is a paper slip generated by this machine. It's essentially a printer. So the moment you cast your vote, there is another machine next to it, the VVPAT machine, right? There is a glass case. You can see inside, the paper gets printed. The paper is shown to you for around 7 seconds. You can see the candidate's name, the party name and the symbol, giving you an acknowledgement, a guarantee that your vote has been correctly captured. And these VVPAT trails, the paper trails, are actually used as reference during the counting process. All right? So now, let's draw a parallel here with other countries. Let's see what other countries are doing before we discuss the advantages and the concerns. If you look at the international practices, most countries have not used electronic voting machines. Either because they don't have the technology, right? Even though it's very simple, rudimentary technology, most countries, poor countries, developing nations won't be able to use electronic machines on such a massive scale, right? Even developed countries, for that matter, have stayed away from it due to various concerns associated with EVMs. It has been tried in Western democracies like England, for example, in Netherlands, France, even in the United States. They've conducted trials by using electronic machines. But due to the flaws in the process, due to the wrong votes getting captured and accounted, and due to the threat of someone compromising these devices, they've all dropped the idea and they've all discontinued the usage of EVMs. Which means even developed nations are using paper ballots. They're back to the old practice, the traditional conventional method of voting. If you look at Germany, in Germany EVMs were used, but the Supreme Court of Germany declared it as unconstitutional in 2009 because of concerns associated with the integrity of the voting machines. If you look at other peers of India, like-minded countries such as Brazil, for example, right, which is also a rising democracy. Brazil uses EVMs just like India, right? Brazil is one example where EVMs are used. But again, even in Brazil, there have been concerns associated with the process. But if you look at other neighbors of India, let's say we look at South Asia region, right? Pakistan does not use any EVMs. Of course, this is irrelevant as well because it's a great thing if Pakistan holds elections at all. Even if it is held, eventually it's determined by the army either ways. So irrespective of that, Pakistan does not use EVMs. Bangladesh experimented with it, but it has gone back to paper ballots in the recent 2024 elections. Even Bangladesh did not find it viable. So India is the only major democracy along with Brazil which use EVMs on a large scale. Now, there are many advantages, many benefits that arise out of using EVMs and VVPATs. Let me explain that quickly. The biggest advantage of EVM is that it eliminated the practice of booth capturing. Previously, when paper ballots were being used, certain candidates with a criminal record who had the muscle power, right? They would bring these goons and gundas, they would storm the polling booths and they would steal the ballots itself. Or they would stuff paper ballots at the last minute. They would snatch the paper ballots, stamp the votes for their candidate and forcefully push them into the ballot box at the last minute of the voting process. Just when the voting was about to end, right, they would deliberately threaten voters not to go and vote. They would storm the polling booth, snatch the ballot box and the ballot papers, basically cast the vote that they want and push them into the ballot box. So booth capturing was a grave threat for Indian democracy. It threatened the very integrity of Indian elections. So unless and until you provide serious security for these polling booths and ballot boxes, there was no way we could have prevented booth capturing, which was very rampant in several parts of India. Right? Now this threat, this concern has been addressed with EVMs. Is that clear? EVM solves the problem. It's not easy to steal an EVM given the security provided. Plus you can't push these false or fake votes because in EVMs, the rate of voting is at 4 votes a minute. If at the last minute, hundreds of votes have been cast, right? You can figure this out. The Election Commission during counting can figure out that someone has tampered with it, that forceful voting has been done at the last minute. Because there is a certain rate at which voting takes place, which is recorded through the EVMs. So booth capturing, forced voting is tackled and eliminated largely because of EVMs. Even invalid votes, which was a huge headache with paper ballots, has been eliminated. Because many times in a paper ballot, people would have not properly cast the stamp, leading to invalid votes, which would become a huge headache in counting process. It would lead to major tussle between different candidates and their agents who are sitting when the counting is taking place. So this has been now eliminated because through EVMs, counting is very transparent. Invalid votes get automatically eliminated if there is any, and it provides a very clear picture about the results. More importantly, given the size of India's population, given the size of our electorate, right? We are the largest democracy in the world with nearly 1 billion voters. Conducting election through paper ballot would simply lead to environmental damage, given the amount of paper that has to be consumed, right? So this is a more eco-friendly option. EVMs are reusable, right? Once they are produced, they can be used for a long number of years, and it's a much more eco-friendly option that reduces the consumption of paper. It also simplifies the logistics, simplifies the counting process. It's more convenient for the electoral authorities, and that is the reason why results come out so quickly, right? Within a day or within few days, results can be given. Counting takes place on a single day, right? By evening, all the counting will be completed across constituencies and final results are announced. With paper ballot, this would have never happened. It would have taken a longer time with more delays, more logistical problems, and more opportunities for tampering. So now it's almost error-free and it provides for very quick results, thus providing for a smooth transition of power. So that is the advantage with EVMs. But of course, Election Commission has taken certain measures as well to ensure that EVMs are not tampered with or misused. For example, EVMs are allocated at random to different constituencies and polling booths. There is no pre-set pattern or pre-decided pattern that this EVM will go to that constituency or that polling booth. If that is done, then it is possible for someone on the back end to tamper with these devices if they know which EVM is going to which booth and which constituency. So this is kept very random. Through a randomized process, EVMs are selected and they are dispatched to different constituencies and different booths, which reduces the possibility of mass tampering. A mock poll is conducted before the elections. Basically, a dry run is conducted with EVMs and VVPATs to check whether they are functioning properly. A thorough dry run is conducted on every single machine. Then during counting, to ensure that the counting is transparent, the serial number of each EVM with the total votes polled for a certain candidate from that particular EVM is given to the agents of the candidate. I hope you know, during counting, agents of the candidate are allowed. They can sit there in front of the electoral officials when the counting is taking place. So once the counting is done, the serial number of every EVM used and the number of votes polled for their respective candidate, this data is given. So they can cross-check. So they can check that there is no foul play, there is no wrong counting of votes. But however, this could give rise to a problem. The problem is when Election Commission is sharing the data of every EVM, right? This could help the candidates to profile their voters, their constituencies. If you're giving the data of every single EVM with the serial number, mentioning which ward, which booth was this EVM used, right? In every booth, there will be few hundred voters. Now, these candidates can figure out how that constituency, how that ward, how the people of that particular block voted, whether they voted for them or for the opponent. They can profile the voters. They can use this data to threaten them in the future, to intimidate them, or to neglect them after they come to power, to not provide any development, any welfare to those areas which did not vote for them. This is one concern, very valid concern that exists. So there are some solutions provided to this as well. There are some suggestions to address this. Now coming to other major concerns, there is a big allegation that EVMs can be hacked. They can be tampered with. Civil society activists and even the political opposition has often alleged that EVMs can be hacked because it is another electronic device and any electronic device is susceptible for tampering. Election Commission has stated there is no possibility of EVM being hacked because it's not a device connected to the internet. It's a completely offline air-gapped device, right? It is completely air-gapped, meaning it has no external connection, all right? It has no connectivity of any sort. So there is no possibility of hacking. Hacking is not possible. But what if someone modulates or let's say tampers with the electronics itself? That is possible. Election Commission says it's just like a calculator. It's not your computer or mobile phone. It's like a calculator, a standalone electronic device. Of course, hacking is not possible. Cyber attack is not possible. But what if the device itself is tampered with? What if the circuitry, the microchips used, what if they are manipulated, right? But again, imagine the scale of Indian elections, right? If elections have to be manipulated, it's almost impossible, virtually impossible to tamper every EVM because lakhs of EVMs are used. So plus Election Commission ensures the safety, the security of the devices with adequate security forces. It sets up the strong rooms where the EVMs are stored and safely protected. There's a lot of checks and balances involved. So it's not so easy for any party or even a candidate to mass tamper all the EVMs to manipulate the elections, right? So Election Commission has given sufficient answers and evidence to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld the integrity of EVMs and VVPATs. But one concern is about the sample size matching. Right now, EVM criteria, the criteria of EVM to VVPAT matching, as per Election Commission, is 5 per assembly constituency. Basically, in every constituency, in every assembly constituency, 5 VVPAT slips are taken, matched with the respective vote to check whether it's correct or wrong. If there is a mismatch, then a recounting is done. Then a matching of all VVPAT slips is done. All the 100% voter paper trails are matched with the votes to see whether the votes are correctly recorded during the counting process. But according to critics, this is unscientific. On what basis has Election Commission chosen 5 VVPAT to be matched with the votes? And this is a very small sample size. So there is an argument that this has to be increased. Right now, few petitioners are arguing in front of the Supreme Court that there should be 100% VVPAT verification. But even that is not feasible. If you want 100% VVPAT verification with the votes, then it's as well as going back to paper ballot system. If you want to sit and count every VVPAT trail, compare that with the votes captured on the EVM, it becomes a very cumbersome process. It will delay the results. It's as good as counting paper ballots again. So that's not feasible either. So somewhere a middle ground has to be found where more VVPAT audit trails are compared with the EVM votes, where the sample size of the comparison is increased. And even if there is one discrepancy, maybe in that constituency alone, all the VVPAT trails can be compared with the votes captured. But it can't be done everywhere. It can't be done across the country. You can't have 100% VVPAT verification. That's too large a sample size, and it will simply make the exercise very redundant. So that is one concern which exists. Next, as I pointed out, profiling of constituencies is possible right now, because Election Commission is giving the data of every EVM during counting. Once the counting is done, for every serial number of EVM, the voting pattern is disclosed to the agents of the candidate, and these candidates will get to know how different wards and blocks have voted for them. So they get to know who has voted for them, who has not voted for them, and thus they can target those voters. They can intimidate them. They can threaten them. They can even neglect them in the future when they come to power. Right? So this is one major flaw that has to be addressed. So what is the way forward then? Way forward, of course, we can't go back to ballot paper. Right? Ballot paper is not feasible for India given the extent of criminalization of Indian politics. Booth capturing will again become the norm. EVM is the right solution for India, but of course the concerns have to be addressed. Election Commission has to instill more confidence that EVMs can't be tampered with. At the same time, 100% matching of VVPAT trails with EVM votes is not possible. It's not feasible. Right? It's very cumbersome again. But at the same time, you can't use only 5 VVPAT trails and compare that with EVM votes. That is not a sufficient sample size. So what experts are suggesting is that we can divide the states and regions accordingly, depending on the population size and the voter base, and increase the sample size of the comparison. Maybe select 100 VVPAT trails and compare that with the votes. And even if there is one single discrepancy, go for a recounting. Go for 100% VVPAT matching with the EVM votes, only in those constituencies, to ensure that the process is completely transparent. Right? This will restore more confidence in the EVM machines and VVPAT machines. So that is something which can be done on a scientific basis. We should identify a statistically right number to instill confidence in the candidates and the voters. Right? Instead of just 5 VVPAT trails, or instead of going for 100% VVPAT verification, which is not feasible on a national scale, it's better to identify a more scientific number, right? Let's say 100 or 500, again, depending on the advice of the experts and depending on how constituencies are divided, right? So more paper trails can be matched with the votes to ensure that the integrity of the elections is maintained. Even if there is one single mismatch between VVPAT and EVM vote, they can go for 100% counting of VVPAT trails, only in those constituencies. So this is a more feasible option. Then to protect the privacy of the voters, right? Ensuring the secrecy of the ballot is critical. It's fundamental to the principle of free and fair elections. Now there is a risk that the candidates' parties get to know how these areas and blocks are voting. This can be stopped by using totalizer machines. Instead of giving the data of every single EVM separately, Election Commission can club the votes of 15, 20 EVMs and then give the voting data without disclosing the blocks or the polling booths. So then they will get aggregate voter data to check whether the counting is proper, but they can't profile the constituency. They can't figure out who voted for which party or which block voted for which candidate. They can't figure that out. They can't carry out the profiling. So that way, voter secrecy is protected and voters are not threatened. So these are some essential steps that need to be taken according to the article. Now let's look at the next article, and the rest of them are very small articles. So let's go through them one by one. The third column talks about the rights of persons with disabilities when it comes to consumer rights. The article is focused on consumer rights of persons with disabilities. That is the focus of the article. See, in India, we have a significant percentage of our population suffering from various disabilities. According to data from the World Bank, as of 2009, 5 to 8% of India's population was suffering from different types of disabilities. It could be motor disabilities of the limbs and the hands. It could be visual impairment or hearing impairment, etc. So a good percentage of our population, 5 to 8% of our population suffers from various disabilities. Now, the disabled people, they can't access all the goods and services in the market like other people can enjoy access to different goods and services. Now, let's say when you go to a supermarket, it's so easy for us to shop what we want, buy what we want, read the label, know the price, know the ingredients, and then get the billing done, pay easily as well. For those with no disabilities, it's never a problem, right? We don't even pay attention to how challenging it could be for a disabled person. Imagine you're watching a movie, right? Those with no disabilities can easily enjoy the movie, which is a service essentially, right? But for someone with visual impairment, hearing impairment, if they don't have the right aids, if they don't have closed captions or subtitles, right? If they don't have hearing aids, there's no way they can enjoy that particular service. Or look at your mobile phones, the various applications that we are using, right? We order so many products on e-marketplaces. We use so many applications for booking cabs, for ordering food, right? So imagine how difficult it must be for those with disabilities to access these basic services that are available, right? How difficult it is for them to go to a supermarket, buy a certain product, right? From billing to payment to even selecting the product, reading the ingredients. It's very difficult for someone with disabilities to do that, right? So this is a very practical problem. It's a problem related to accessibility. So if you don't ensure your goods and services are accessible to the disabled, then you're doing a big disservice to the entire community. You're depriving them of their fundamental rights, right? Because those who are disabled, right, their independence gets crippled. Their dignity, their personal life, including their privacy, gets compromised when you don't ensure that they have equitable access to all the goods and services available in the market. So the industry has to adopt, right? They have to adapt to the disabled people, provide new features. Let's say a supermarket can add tactile features where a visually impaired person can touch and get to know what the product is, what's the price, etc. Right? They can use braille in wherever possible to make the goods and services more accessible to the people with disabilities. For example, the FSSAI has taken a major step recently, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. It has ordered all the food operators in India to mandatorily use a QR code on the food packaging. Because today, smartphones are disabled friendly, right? So those who are disabled, let's say someone who has a visual impairment, right? They can use the QR scanner on their phone, scan the QR code, and the phone can read out the ingredients, the manufacturing date, expiry date, and the price as well. So that those with disabilities have access to all the information about a certain commodity, about a certain service, which guarantees their right to accessibility, right? Now, in India, we have a law to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. It was enacted in 2016, the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act. So under the law, the right of the disabled people is defined. It focuses on their right to accessibility, their right to dignity, their right to privacy, etc. And it specifically deals with consumer goods and information communication technology services. The law specifies that consumer goods should be disabled friendly. iCET services, all your technology apps, social media platforms, the e-marketplaces, the various apps that we all use on mobile phones and computers, they should be disabled friendly. They should be designed, developed in such a manner so that it complies with BIS standards, Bureau of Indian Standards. So it is a legal obligation on every company and as well as on the government as well to ensure that right to accessibility of persons with disabilities is protected. But problem is this law is not very strictly enforceable. All right. Now, there is another related law where the violations can be enforced more strictly, can be dealt with more strictly. That is your Consumer Protection Act. Under Consumer Protection Act of 2019, there are stricter provisions for enforcement if quality service is not delivered to the customer, right? But there are no specific provisions here dealing with rights of disabled. Those provisions are there in RPWDA, that is Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Here problem is lack of enforcement. See, there is a disability commission set up under the law that receives the complaints regarding violations. If any company, if any business or even a government entity, right, if it is not complying with these standards and not making goods and services accessible to the disabled, complaints can be filed at the Disability Commission established under the law. But this proceeding takes a very long time. And in many cases, there has been no strict enforcement. Under Consumer Protection Act, the Consumer Protection Forum, right, has been very proactive. The Consumer Protection Courts, they are very proactive in enforcing the violations. They ensure that the companies and even the government entities, they comply with the law. But problem is, this law does not specifically deal with the rights of disabled persons. That's why the writers are calling for closer alignment between the two laws. What if the enforcement provisions of Consumer Protection Act is brought into the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act? Or what if disability-specific provisions are added under Consumer Protection Act and bring alignment between the two laws so that the rights of persons with disabilities can be protected? It can push the private companies and the government entities to focus on ensuring that every consumer good, every service delivered is accessible to those with disabilities. So that is the conclusion that we draw from this article. So businesses have a big role to play, government institutions have a big role to play, and the laws have to be brought in alignment. If this is done, then the rights of the disabled community can be protected. Is that clear? The consumer rights of those with disabilities can be protected. Now let's take a quick look at the prelims section. This article on page number 4 refers to a very important initiative between India and United States, which is called iCET initiative. According to the article, there was a planned review of iCET initiative between India and US, between the national security advisors of both the countries. India's NSA Ajit Doval, who leads the National Security Council of India, was supposed to meet with the National Security Advisor of the US, Jake Sullivan, and interact with the National Security Council of the US. So these National Security Councils of India and US, they are driving this new initiative which has been started called iCET. But at the last minute, the visit of the NSA of US has been cancelled because of the tensions in West Asia due to Iran-Israel clashes. So US is completely focusing on the ongoing problem in West Asia, and the NSA of US is preoccupied with the problem. So at the last minute, the visit has been cancelled. So that's the development being reported here. Now for prelims, you should know what is iCET. It stands for Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies. It's a bilateral initiative for building cooperation between India and US in the field of critical and emerging technologies. This was proposed in 2022 as India-US defense relations and strategic and economic relations were growing. In 2022, a proposal was made for such an initiative, and it was established last year in 2023. It was proposed in 2022 and established in 2023. This initiative is led by the National Security Councils and the National Security Advisors of both the countries, of both India and US. So critical and emerging technologies are the focus of this initiative. For example, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, then semiconductors, semiconductor fabrication, manufacturing, design, etc. and advanced wireless communication technology, from 5G, 6G networks to Open RAN technology, right, which represent the future of wireless communication. So these advanced technologies, which are going to drive the fourth stage of the industrial revolution, which are going to bring enormous industrial and economic benefits along with strategic benefits, because these technologies have military applications as well, right? From AI to wireless communication, they all find application in the military domain and as well as in the civilian domain. So that is why the initiative is driven by the National Security Councils through the National Security Advisors. So they meet regularly to drive cooperation in critical emerging technologies. And under this, they have set up a forum called INDUS-X for defense collaboration, for defense technology development in critical emerging domain. They have set up a separate platform under iCET called INDUS-X, India-US X. It essentially represents defense collaboration in these domains between Indian and American institutions and companies. Next, on the same page, there's an article referring to the Combined Maritime Forces, or CMF. So according to the article, Indian Navy, which is an associate partner of Combined Maritime Forces, has conducted a maritime security operation in Western Arabian Sea. It has targeted a ship which was smuggling narcotics in the Arabian Sea, and it has apprehended the criminals. So this operation was part of CMF, or Combined Maritime Forces, which is based out of Bahrain. So let's understand what is Combined Maritime Forces. It is a US-led maritime security initiative. It's led by the US Navy. See, in Bahrain, which is a small West Asian country, at its capital Manama. Manama is the capital of Bahrain. So there you have the headquarters of the 5th Naval Fleet of US Navy. It's a major military command of the US Navy. In fact, all the naval operations of the US across West Asia, Middle East is run through this command center, the 5th Naval Fleet. It's headquartered in Bahrain in Manama. So from here, the US has built a multilateral naval initiative, maritime security initiative. It has brought many countries together, many foreign navies together to focus on maritime security operations all across West Asia and beyond West Asia. So Combined Maritime Force is this maritime security initiative. It's a multilateral initiative that includes around 42 countries. US and its Western allies and regional partners, they're all part of the initiative, including India. India has recently joined as an associate member. Please remember this point. Recently in 2022, following the close defense relations between India and US and the 2+2 ministerial meeting, India announced that it is going to join the CMF as an associate member in 2022. So since then, Indian Navy actively participates in these naval missions and maritime security operations. So there are different task force under the Combined Maritime Forces. You have Combined Task Force 150 that focuses on maritime security operations outside of Red Sea area, that is Gulf of Oman and Indian Ocean. It was this task force that carried out the latest operation reported in the article. The Indian Navy, which intercepted the drug consignment, right? This operation took place in Western Arabian Sea, which is in Indian Ocean. So this task force focuses only on Gulf of Oman and the rest of the area that is part of Indian Ocean, Western Arabian Sea. So Indian Navy is very proactive in this task force. There is another task force dedicated for counter piracy near Horn of Africa. A dedicated task force for the Arabian Gulf, the Persian Gulf, which is critical for oil supplies, as well as security around the Hormuz Strait. See, this is the Persian Gulf. You can see that here. If you look at Task Force 150, it operates in this region, Gulf of Oman and Indian Ocean, the Western Arabian Sea. If you look at Task Force 151, it operates here in Gulf of Aden, near Horn of Africa, to tackle piracy. Then you have Task Force 153 operating here in Red Sea and in Gulf of Aden. Right? It basically protects shipping here through Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Then there is a security training task force, which is Task Force 154. So India takes part in all these task force, be it counter-piracy missions, or stabilizing Bab el-Mandeb and Hormuz, or stabilizing Gulf of Aden, Gulf of Oman, Persian Gulf, Red Sea. We take part in all the operations with the combined maritime force. So given the developments happening here, this is a very important topic because India has become an associate member as well. Next article, not an article but an image on page number 7 that depicts the Great Barrier Reef, the popular Great Barrier Reef of Australia, which is known for its coral structures. The picture shared by the Hindu is expressing concern about coral bleaching, which is a result of pollution, climate change, and global warming. So it's important to understand what is Great Barrier Reef, where is it located, why corals are important, and what is coral bleaching. See, Great Barrier Reef is in Australia, in the north. It's located in the northeastern part of Australia over here, right? This is Queensland. So towards this part of the Pacific, that is where the Great Barrier Reef is located. It's the world's largest coral structure. It is so massive that it is visible from outer space. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and also recognized as one of the natural wonders of the world. See, corals are very critical habitats in the marine ecosystem. They have a symbiotic relationship with the algae that they host. In these coral polyps, which are basically made out of calcium carbonate, the algae is hosted here, which adds color to the coral structure, right? It engages in the process of photosynthesis. It acts as a carbon sink. It takes away a lot of carbon from the atmosphere, locks it away in the oceans, and it's a huge habitat for various marine species. Several marine organisms depend on coral reefs for food and shelter. That's why it's even called the rainforest, the evergreen forest of the ocean. That is how high the productivity is in coral structures. But these coral reefs are very sensitive, especially the algae that reside inside the polyps. They are very, very sensitive. They are sensitive to changes in salinity, temperature, and any toxic pollutants. But as you know, we humans have polluted our seas and oceans, from plastic pollution to heavy metals to toxic pollutants, right? Plus global warming, climate change has increased the sea's temperature. The water temperature has gone up. Plus acidification of oceans is taking place. As we have released more greenhouse gases, more carbon is being absorbed into the oceans, which is causing the acidification of the oceans as well. And all these developments, they bleach the corals, right? The algae will be pushed out of the polyps because of the adverse condition. The algae dies out, the coral loses the color, becomes just a bleached white calcium carbonate structure, and this is what we call as coral bleaching. It's a huge environmental threat, right? It threatens the marine ecosystem, it threatens the natural biogeochemical processes, and it further contributes to the vicious cycle of climate change and global warming. So that is why the bleaching happening here in Great Barrier Reef is of great global concern. Coming to next article on page 12. The article is referring to the report of the IMF, the most important publication of the IMF, which is the World Economic Outlook. The article itself is not too relevant. It's only providing projections about the global economy and the Indian economy, right? It's talking about India's projected growth of around 6.8%. That's the projected GDP growth for India by the IMF. So the more important point here for prelims is the report itself. So who publishes World Economic Outlook? It is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So coming to the last article on page 15. This article refers to a maritime dispute between Greece and Turkey. In the Mediterranean, there is an ongoing maritime dispute between Greece and Turkey. So you should have some basic knowledge about this. See, this is where Greece is located in Eastern Europe. It has one of the longest coastlines in Europe. Can you believe that? Many people have a wrong assumption that Greece is a small country, right? Geographically, its total territorial extent might be smaller, but because of the natural coastline present here, the shape of the coastline, Greece has one of the longest coastlines in all of Europe. So Greece is located over here. This is the Mediterranean. You can see the Ionian Sea. You can see the Ionian Sea connected with the Mediterranean. The Aegean Sea over here, right? So this is where Turkey is located on this side. So this is where Greece is located. But between them, right, there is a standing maritime dispute with regard to their exclusive economic zone. Now here in the map, you can see the EEZ of Greece. It extends till here. The claim lines are clearly depicted here. This is where the Turkish EEZ is supposed to end. But Turkey has extended its claims beyond what it has been awarded. It is claiming part of Greece's EEZ as well, which extends near the Crete island. Can you see the Crete island here? It actually belongs to Greece. So the EEZ around it belongs to Greece, but Turkey is claiming part of the EEZ because this region is rich in hydrocarbons and minerals and fisheries. It is a very resource-rich region. It has oil potential, it has minerals, mineral deposits, and rich in fisheries. So that is why it's a contested area between Turkey and Greece. So the claim of Turkey has led to a standoff, a dispute between them. Turkey gets very aggressive as well. In fact, Turkey is so aggressive in the region that it has targeted another country here, that is Cyprus. Half of Cyprus has been captured by Turkey. Cyprus is an independent sovereign nation, right? It's a very small island country, but half of Cyprus has been captured by Turkey. It's an illegal occupation, not recognized by many countries. So just like it occupied Cyprus territory, part of it, it is trying to lay claim on Crete Island and the nearby islands here to extend its EEZ claims, which brings the two countries into conflict. So Greece has proposed the establishment of marine parks to strengthen its claims. Greece wants to establish two marine parks for conservation, but the real intention is a geopolitical intention to strengthen the claims of Greece. So Turkey is opposing this on environmental grounds, saying that these marine parks are not sustainable, it's not environment friendly. Turkey is opposing Greece. And you should know about one particular region here, which is the Hellenic Trench. That's my last point for today. Please write this down. It can be very important for your prelims. There can be a map-based geography question. Where is the Hellenic Trench located? What is its significance? Let me show you in the map where Hellenic Trench is located. It's basically an underwater ridge between Greece and the Crete Island, present over here. It's an underwater ridge, right? A mountain-like structure followed by a deep gorge, a trench or a valley-like structure found over here between the Ionian and the Aegean Sea, stretching from Greece towards the Crete Island. So this is where Greece wants to establish marine parks to strengthen its claims and expand its EEZ and maintain its EEZ claims. So Turkey is opposing the proposal by Greece. So please know where Hellenic Trench is located. This is the resource-rich region as well. It is blessed with hydrocarbons, minerals, and fisheries as well. So on this note, I would like to conclude today's discussion. Please take up these two questions for your answer writing practice, right? We have discussed both the topics in detail. I've given you the entire explanation with a proper structure. You just have to use those points, write an answer, and ensure that you maintain a proper flow. So do write the answer and post the answers in the comments so that you can help other students as well. So I hope you guys have liked the session, understood everything. If you did, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. So that is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.